Thank you. Good morning and welcome to everyone here at Unity Church of San Marcos. For those of you all who will be seeing this online later, thank you for taking the opportunity to spend some of your time here with us here at Unity Church of San Marcos. We hope to see you here in the community on a Sunday very, very soon, but we thank you for taking the time to use this in your own private time, in your own private space. We really, really appreciate that. Today we are going to be talking about the power of order primarily. Pretty much for the whole year I've been kind of framing my talks around whatever the power of the month is. And if you recall, over the last 3 months or so, over the course of the summer, we were kind of building upon each of those things. We talked about the twin powers, the power of understanding and that power of reason and discernment, that power of judgment that we have. We talked about the power of imagination along the way, and we talked about the linkage kind of between those three powers that come in the summer months and everything. But you've heard me say before, and you probably have come across it in your own studies and so forth, that the 12 powers do not work in isolation to the other powers, that in some form or fashion they may not always be finely tuned and in a synergistic kind of relationship of alignment. We might forget, for example, our power of renunciation, our power of release and elimination, and we get stuck, like my friend, he's stuck in a certain pattern of thinking right now, not knowing that he has a power to release and eliminate that negative thinking and recalibrate back to that space that he's familiar with, that he already has the experience. No one has to convince him of the experience that he had when he was living in alignment, with his God. It's a different path than the one that would work for me, but if it brings him into that positive relationship with God, it's not for me to judge just because I need a different kind of school curriculum, so to speak, that speaks to me. God has many, many ways to speak to people and to reach them. And so if he's able to be reached through something that doesn't work for me necessarily in terms of how the orientation goes, but it works for him and it keeps him on the path, then it has value. One of the things that I often say about A Course in Miracles, there's a section in there where it's talking about how is value established, basically. It's like, what is the value of the unity principles, for example? What's the value of those 5 principles? And A Course in Miracles says the value of anything is in its usefulness as a learning device. Does it facilitate learning? And if it facilitates learning, by extension, it facilitates our transformation as well. So when we're evaluating a book, a movie, anything, any of our own habits in our own lives, it's like, what's the value of gardening? Does it facilitate learning? Well, if you're a devoted gardener, yeah, there's a lot of things to learn from that, isn't it? Not the least of which is our own co-creation in that experience, caring for our gardens, caring for our plants, and the relationship, and quite frankly, the health benefits that come to us when we're actually actively participating in the growth of something, that we're participating in that mystery. How does this tiny little seed turn into this beautiful tree? How does that birthing process, and we see that, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that divine imprint, the formula of life, and it's everywhere. I'm not going to go too much into this, but has anybody ever looked at the monarch butterflies and have thought about like what their life process is like and how miraculous it is? I was last week I was delivering a version of this talk somewhere else, and I was driving. I was going to Bernie last week, and I was driving and I was listening to a woman unity minister. I think she was from up in Virginia somewhere, and she was talking about the law of order, the power of order, and she gave a really, really nice explanation about the monarch butterfly, and I learned something because there was a key piece that I didn't know before in her explanation. It was this: just sort of widely, anybody that would be aware of the monarch butterfly thing, one of the things that we probably all are aware of is their migration, and how miraculous at a certain time of the year where they migrate along the same migratory patterns and everything to go there and lay their lay their eggs, you know, for the next life cycle. But what I learned from her was this: in the context of one calendar year, that the monarch butterflies go through 4 generations. There's a, you know, spring generation, and it goes, you know, from the, you know, the larvae to the caterpillar to the cocoon and finally to the butterfly. And that's very, very short. All of that takes place over about a 6 to 8 week period, to the point to where the butterflies have passed on, you know, and they spring up the next generation. And there's 3 cycles through the course of the year that follow this short lifespan. The 4th cycle, which is basically kind of going on right now, that those monarch butterflies that are born in that 4th cycle during the year, they live 6 to 8 months, whereas the previous 3 generations live 6 to 8 weeks total. So they go through those 3 gestational periods, and then the 4th generation is the one that lives 6 to 8 months. It's that 4th generation that does the migration that we're all generally aware of. And I was not aware of, you know, you just assume, so I go, here's the life of a butterfly, a monarch butterfly, and this is what they do. It's like, no, wow, that was amazing to me when I had it explained to me that way. I was like, where's the order in that? Like, what is going on with the divine intelligence that understands enough that these butterflies can go through these 3 sort of short gestational life processes, and then that 4th generation has an exceptional one compared to that. But it's not disconnected from the first 3. The first 3 are necessary to set the stage for the 4th one. And then at the end of the 4th generation's life cycle, it's basically planting the seed for that cycle to begin again in the next year.
Wow.
I couldn't have thought of that. I couldn't have thought of that. If I was going to create the cycle of the monarch butterflies, it would be equal. They would all look the same. They would all live 6 to 8 months or whatever that term is. So what's the mystery behind why the 3 generations have a shorter lifespan to set the stage for the 4th, and the 4th has the longer lifespan to set the stage for the cycle to repeat again the following year? That's amazing to me. That's miraculous, and those are the kinds of things that really excite me spiritually when we look deeply into the divine order of things and realize the multi-dimensions that this is all being worked out on in the life process. And that's just one species among, like, how many species are on the planet? Plants, animals, insects, fish, birds, you and me, like trees, like all the different life cycles that are working out. And in their own way, each one of them has a very unique expression, a unique kind of process that we go through. That when I look at the divine order and turn my attention to say, okay, well, this world out here appears to be chaotic. It appears to be very fragile. It appears to be on the brink of falling completely apart. Okay, and we don't want that, because the fear of what that would look like if it fell apart scares us, and rightly so. It probably should concern us and probably should scare us. But in unity, we have the practical tools to help us reaffirm, no, there is a wholeness in play. I am whole, despite the appearances. That whatever may be physically challenging me in my body, what might be, you know, challenging me in my relationships or my relationship to the world or whatever, that in my soul, in that part of me that is the divine part, that part is still whole. It's completely and wholly unaffected in reality, capital R reality, from all of these external conditions that we're experiencing in our human condition. It's one of those things, like you were talking about the attachment a little while ago. Are we attached to our identity as being a human? Or are we attached to our identity as being a spiritual being having a human experience? It's a much different orientation when we affirm the divinity within us first and not the humanness, because from our human perspective, We all fall short of the glory, from our human perspective. And it's not because, there might not be a minister or a counselor or just someone who loves you in your life that's inspiring you to, to greater achievement and everything. If you don't want to be made well, if you answer, do you want to be made well? Well, no. Well, then what are we talking about? We have to first say yes to it. We have to say yes to the healing. We have to say yes to the potential for peace to express in the external world. But if we're waiting on the external world to be at peace before we allow ourselves to experience personal peace, got some disappointing news for all of us, that we will never experience peace if we're going to wait for the world to get its act together first. The world needs each one of us to cultivate that experience of peace internally, and to do it diligently, to affirm it, to affirm our wholeness, because as we heal, we move through our experience and our relationships and our communities, families, friends, and even the kinds of thoughts that we maintain in our own consciousness for the state of the world. We then become co-creators and contributors to that. Remember, unity principle number 3 says we're co-creating this experience by the thoughts and the feelings that we allow to dominate in our consciousness. And if we have any power whatsoever in the world, cultivating, being in charge of my thinking activity, that really is where you can exercise your power. That really is kind of like the only place, because if I change my thinking, if I recalibrate, if I retact, like with my friend who's struggling right now, I'm trying to encourage him to recalibrate, but if he doesn't want to be made well, it doesn't mean that I have failed in my part to inspire him to do that. Although that becomes a challenge too, because if we love someone and we care for someone and we're attached to them changing their behavior for the better, and I'm the one in communication with them, and if they are unwilling to change their mind, it's easy for us to take that on as our failing. And it has nothing to do with us, because that person still has a choice in the matter. My choice is to continue to love him, even in his struggle, even when he gets angry at me, even when he says, I'm going to hell right along with him, and he's got to convince me, he's got to save me before he goes. He doesn't even say that if he saves me, he'll be saved. He still believes he's going to hell, but that in his last breaths, he wants to spend that time trying to save me. But he won't. He doesn't want to be made well. Anybody ever known anybody like that? Addict, alcoholic, somebody who's totally committed to something that is deleterious to their physical and spiritual and emotional being, maybe even financial wellness and everything, and they're wholly committed to that process. You know what the first rule is when you find yourself digging yourself in a hole? You know what the first thing you should do is when you find yourself digging yourself in a hole? Put down the shovel. Step away from the shovel. You have to stop and you have to allow that there's a new decision that I can make. There is a new order that is available for my life. Men, as a man, I don't know this, and y'all have probably heard this similar kind of statements, like there's a boy growing up, big boys don't cry. Suck it up, rub a little dirt on it. Don't ever let the world see you sweat. Don't ever show weakness. Those are the kinds of conditionings that we got as young boys growing into men and everything. And so the idea of surrender is, no, it's antithetical to how we were. It feels passive, that if we surrender, we give up. Never surrender, right? But surrender is actually one of the more powerful things that we can do. I've been doing Mastermind now for 2008 when I began. I meet with 3 other gentlemen, all from Unity Church of the Hills. We meet once a week on Thursday mornings, have breakfast for a couple hours, and we do our Mastermind meeting. And for those of y'all that have done Masterminding before, the very first step in the Mastermind consciousness is, I surrender. I surrender. I admit that of my personality self, Rick, I am powerless to solve my problems because I'm the one that created the problems in the first place. And I need help. Anybody ever been to a 12-step program or know somebody in a 12-step program? First step is surrender. Let go. Release. Fortunately, we have a power of renunciation, a power of release, a power of elimination. That's the power of the month for the month of November. And so we have that capacity within us to release. But we have to answer that question. Do we really want to be made well? Do I really want to feel God's power in my life? Do I really want and desire to experience peace? The world is on fire, so to speak. Okay? And I turn on the TV and I'm tempted in 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different talking heads to buy into this or that, and no matter which part of the spectrum they're on, they're speaking divisive talk because they're saying that one side or the other, if one side or the other wins, we're all lost. And so they're using an appeal of fear to bring us into line, to bring us into compliance. And we know that, a spirit of fear is not going to work out well. Your peace is out the window, number one. Like, you have no shot at experiencing peace as long as you are buying into the fear. There's none. You will never experience peace as long as you are choosing to align with fear or to be persuaded by those appeals. We have to do the work to affirm that there is a oneness, that there is a unity, that there is a divine order, that there is one power and one presence, and that one power and one presence ultimately is good in the way that we would evaluate good. Now, it may take longer. We're kind of impatient. So it may take longer for the divine order to reestablish itself in appearance in the physical world. And we get impatient because, well, if God's all powerful, why doesn't He just correct this right now? Well, God gave us free will. And He cannot and will not take that away. Because that free will is where we get to choose to align with God. And if we choose to align with that power, with that presence, if we choose to affirm our wholeness, if we choose to affirm the divine order despite the appearances, then we are doing it voluntarily and cooperatively. We're not being forced into compliance. If we were forced into compliance, then we wouldn't, number one, have free will. That's out the window. Just that whole body of philosophical thought and everything about free will, it's useless now. We can just go ahead and burn those books. But we do have free will, and that free will implies responsibility. And it's been my experience personally, in my own resistance as I was growing and transforming, and even in the case of my friend here, is that if we don't allow that power to express through us, we'll believe it's absent. We'll believe that I'm not worthy. Still, even this far down the road in my own spiritual path, my ego will still tempt me to believe that I'm not worthy, that I haven't done enough. I haven't done it perfectly. Oh, I have an inner perfectionist critic that just stays up all night long, just tempting me all night long. That unless you do it perfectly, it's not good enough. And so if I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. If I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. It's like it's a spiral. And it happens on a regular basis. And every time it happens, it's just like Jesus in the desert with the temptations and everything. You have to say no. You have to say no to those temptations that are tempting you away from your power, because that's all they're trying to do. The devil, so to speak, doesn't create anything. The devil tries to convince us that we're powerless. And he's kind of good at it. There's lots of ways to attack us in that regard. But if we continue to affirm our wholeness, if we continue to affirm our divinity, if we continue to affirm that there is one power, one presence, that even in the context of all this conflict, and all the chaos and the order that is present in the world, that's actually part of a unified whole. And that they are necessary polarities, so to speak, necessary energies, so that we can see. Y'all have seen the yin and yang symbol before. I probably have said this before, but if you bring that yin and yang symbol to your mind, you see those two kind of curvy figures kind of slotting into one another. You know, look like two tadpoles or whatever. But if you recall that in both of those spaces, there is a dot inside each of those spaces. One side is chaos, one side is order. But that dot within both sides represents the potential for the other. So if you're looking at the chaos side of the yin-yang symbol, that dot represents the potential for order. And if you look at the order side of the yin-yang symbol, that dot represents the potential for chaos. But it's a unified whole. It's a perfectly symmetrical, perfectly ordered, philosophical thought. It's a perfect symbol to represent the polarities of the chaos and the order. And that within each is the potential for the other. That's perfect. That's a perfect design. That's a perfect ordered design. You can just simply meditate on that meaning of just put a yin-yang symbol on your wall and go into meditation and look at that and just contemplate that. That is the truth, capital T truth. When Jesus says in the scriptures, there will always be wars and rumors of wars. Be not concerned, this is the world giving birth to itself. These are the birth pains of the world. Think about everything that you know about history. Think about everything that you know in your own lifetime. Has the world ever been at peace? The external world I'm talking about. Never. There's always been a war going on or a rumor of one coming. And every one of those symbols in the external world is a potential outright attack on our personal peace or an invitation for us to believe in that war as being more important than affirming the order. Each one of us changes our minds and moves into that space of affirming our healing, affirming our wholeness, affirming the divine order of things in your own private thoughts. You don't even have to talk about it with anybody. Just in your own private space, when you take on that responsibility for yourself to bring your own thinking back into alignment with the presence of that divine order, you actually heal the world as you're healing yourself. You don't have to do any overt action. What is yours to do, Spirit will nudge you. I was talking with a dear friend of mine who I've known for just a few years. I met her shortly after my mother passed away in 2019. I see her several times a week now. She's about 10 years older than me. She's not old enough to be my mother, but she's old enough to be my big sister, so to speak. She has 3 boys. My mother had 3 boys. It's like all kinds of things. So she's kind of become kind of my kind of maternal figure, my maternal relationship. And it was just a random meeting. We, met in a restaurant. And now we see each other several times a week, and it's become one of my most important relationships. Even Faith loves her. Faith will come to dinner with me sometimes, and when Faith is there, Miss Linda and Faith do all the talking. I'm just sitting over there watching the TV, watching the sports on the TV when Faith comes with me. She's just a delightful person. But my relationship with her was one of those ones where I speak to her like I'm speaking to you right now. I speak to all my friends this way, just random strangers. If you're going to be in a conversation with me for more than 5 minutes, we're going to go deep. We're not going to talk about superficial things. I just don't have them. I'd just rather be left alone than to talk about superficial things. We can talk about sports. I love talking about sports too. It's not everything is all serious, but we're going to go deep, and we're going to talk about these kinds of things, because I do believe everything is spiritual, that there is an order being played out, and that it's mine to align myself with the order rather than try and dictate the terms of the order. The human spirit is, just think about it. There's over 8 billion of us on the planet right now. How many have come before us? How many will come after us? Is this the only planet in the universe, the vast universe, where there is life forms? Can anybody understand that? The purpose of it, how it was created? We got all kinds of stories and ideas about what it, how it was created and everything, but nobody really knows for sure. Nobody really knows for sure, and that's the mystery. That's the power. And that's the opportunity that we have to bring ourselves into alignment with that. So with that, I want to turn our attention to our contemplative period, our meditation period. If anybody has any questions or comments after we're done and you'd like to ask me something or give a comment to the group, you can, yes. And thank you all once again for joining us online. We hope to see you very soon here at Unity of San Marcos. Have a great day. Peace.